Good morning, afternoon, wherever you are in the world. Today's a big day in DC. Nathan Dean, welcome to the show, man. I'm
Uh,
excited to talk to you today.
oh no, thanks for having me as always.
You know, living in DC as long as I have, the camaraderie has always been the same. Tune in, Monocle's, Irish Times, same bars, same places, right?
So
Uh,
this is our Super Bowl night. This is what we live for.
yeah, and you know what's interesting is this is going to be an interesting one. Talk to us a little bit about what you're seeing in Washington, what the feeling is right now, and what do you expect out of tonight so far?
Yeah, so let's go back to last Friday. Let's go back to the Supreme Court ruling on tariffs. Now, I don't think anybody was anticipating the Supreme Court wasn't going to rule the way that they didn't. Kalshi and the betting markets certainly had it around 75%. We had given it a 60% chance that the Supreme Court was going to rule the way that they did. And obviously, we saw President Trump's reaction, very much saying, look, I don't need IEPA, I have other avenues. And the question is really two things now that's coming from the Supreme Court is what happens next? And then secondly, what's this idea of refund chaos, this idea of refunds? So let's first talk about what's happened with President Trump since then. So President Trump no longer has the ability to use IEPA to conduct tariffs. Now that gives us a little bit of clarity moving forward. You're not going to wake up and see that there's a Truth Social post saying starting tonight at midnight, there's going to be a 200% tariff on a country or else something, in response to a negotiation. So there's a little bit of clarity there. But when President Trump says that Congress has given him already other authorities to conduct tariffs, he is actually saying that he is correct in that. So what President Trump has done is he's slapped what's known as a 122 tariff, 122 being the section of the Trade Act of 1974, which allows the president to go up to 15% for 150 days. Now, even though he said he's going up to 15%, it's still 10% as of today. And so something to keep in mind that's, even though he said 15%, it's only at 10%. We haven't seen the executive order related to that. But that's up for 150 days. And then Congress would have to authorize or extend those. And we don't really see that happening. We think President Trump's going to go to other avenues like Section 301 and Section 232.
Yeah, and you talk about a president who kind of came in, kind of swept the nation a little bit, and now the new polls numbers are not showing very good numbers for him right now. Even Fox Business had him at 39% approval rating. When you look
Well, I
at that,
apologize. I'm having technical difficulties at the moment, but it's in case. Oh, Stephen, you're back. Sorry about that.
yeah, and when you look at 39% approval rating from the Fox Business, I got to go, whoa, that's a little low. You hear now from some of the Democrats saying they're not even going to show up for the Supreme Court. SCOTUS is saying they might not even, something might not even show up. There might be some scowling going on. I don't know. What are you thinking about tonight? I mean, what is the feeling going on around Washington right now?
So, State of the Unions, the night of an election year. So, State of the Unions during an election year are always viewed as campaign speeches. President Trump's approval rating isn't all that good at the moment, and this is something that President Trump has really never dealt with within recent times. And so it'll be interesting to see what happens. Now, I don't think the Democrats are really going to, well, look, we are going to have some political fireworks. I don't think we're going to have a return of Representative Al Green standing up and pointing his cane at the president or something like that. A lot of a lot of Democrats have said that they're not going to attend. Every few State of the Unions, you do get a couple of members of the opposite party who say, look, I'm not going to attend. I'm going to rather watch the speech with my constituents. But the messaging from leadership on both sides of the aisle is let the other one be the one that actually shows their cards, so to speak. But really, there's three themes that I think that should emerge for investors tonight. The first is geopolitics. The reason why I say that is because for everything else that President Trump says, there's a process, and you can work the process and you can sort of figure out where the end game is here. So there's time for you to react. But with geopolitics, that changes almost an instant basis. I mean, obviously, there's lots of talk about a strike in Iran, a limited strike. Obviously, there's negotiations taking place in Geneva that are scheduled for Thursday. But geopolitics is the one thing that can flip almost instantly. So keep that in mind. The other one is tariffs. Now, President Trump is going to double down on tariffs. He's going to look the Supreme Court in the eye, those that show up. That's going to be a little awkward. I'm going to be looking to see what happens there. But I don't think you're going to see any new news on tariffs. President Trump has really shown where he wants to be. And it's going to take the U.S. Trade Representative time to convert these tariffs from a 122 tariff to a Section 301 tariff. So I don't think you're going to see any new news at the moment. And then finally, on affordability, this is where President Trump is addressing it to the American populace here. is he's going to be pushing a lot of ideas about affordability. The question that you have to ask yourself is, can President Trump get this through via legislation, which isn't looking likely, regulation, which takes a long time, or executive action / bully pulpit? That's where President Trump is going to most likely focus on. And for those of us in the markets, that leads to headline risk, but not short-term threats.
You know, one of the things I heard that's in the speech is that he is now going to officially say that this is my economy, that this is my decisions and my ideas. But is he going to talk about anything more than the economy? Is he going to talk about Iran? Is he going to talk about Ukraine? Is he going to talk about his peace prize? Is he going to talk about this normal blustering? Or is he going to stick to the script and kind of do his own thing here?
Well, you know, I'm not sure President Trump sticks to scripts all that much, and look, and that's by design. I mean, he's very, very well done. You know, he's very good at ad-libbing, if you will, and so you know, that's one of his strengths as a politician. But what I'll say here is that, you know, the geopolitical piece is obviously going to play a part. It always does in every State of the Union. You know, the power of the president is more powerful when it comes to national security, trade, and relations, international relations. So presidents, especially presidents in their second administrations, as they get closer to that dreaded lame duck status, begin to play a little bit more in the international space. And so President Trump is going to make statements, I think essentially just daring Iran and saying, look, you need to come back to the table here. Now, the latest that we have from Bloomberg News and the scenario analysis that I read from my friends over at Bloomberg Economics is that, you know, really the idea here at the moment is a limited strike that try and forces Iran to the table to have further negotiations. And then ultimately, those other negotiations take place. Now, I am not a geopolitical strategist, but in talking to friends who are, you know, two things that have always been explained to me of what I should be looking for is, you know, embassies to be withdrawn. So far, we've only seen that happen in Beirut. We have not seen that in other areas around the region. And then also, I would just call out, a lot of people in Washington are pointing out that the Prime Minister of India, Prime Minister Modi, is currently visiting Israel. So you wouldn't normally want to attack Iran when the Prime Minister of India is currently in Jerusalem.
Yeah, and you look at and I've always said it's Fifth Fleet diplomacy, right? Where is the Fifth Fleet? That's what we're thinking about. It seems we have quite a few ships in the Middle East right now. Is that by design? You heard General Kane this morning saying that we're not prepared to bomb Iran. We don't have enough ammunition here. And we've heard in the past that Trump says he knows more than the generals. So in all of those comments, if I put them together, it seems that he's not listening to his generals, or is he?
Well, look, ultimately, the decision always lies with the president. I mean, the president is the commander in chief. And so the president makes ultimately that decision. How much he listens to, you know, his staff, it differs depending on who the president is. But, you know, we should talk about, like, the amount of resources the United States has thrown in terms of naval assets to the region. They can't stick around forever. I mean, there's only so much optimistic time frame of when these assets are there before people start to need to be replaced, ships need to be replaced, you know, and so forth. And so there's only a finite amount of time that President Trump has until that, you know, those units have to be withdrawn. So, you know, I think what happens here is that you will see negotiations take place further. Like I said, they're scheduled for Geneva on Thursday. But, you know, a lot will happen over the next 10 to 15 days, and President Trump will address this tonight in the State of the Union.
Yeah, and so talk to me a little bit. I know geopolitical is not your issue, but it seems that on the borders of the Hispanics in Texas, we're hearing a lot of rumble in Florida here, politically, right? That maybe the Latin community is not so happy with him. Does Texas turn blue? I've heard that a few times now. Does Indiana possibly with members of the in Chicago, Democrats leaving Chicago, moving into Indiana? Is there going to be some changes of states that we don't think that are normally red turn blue and blue turn red?
So for everybody listening, I think what Stephen did there is he really stuck a knife in my heart about my Chicago Bears moving from Soldier Field down to Hammond.
You know, I'm an Illinois boy too, Nathan. I love the Bears too. I am a Redskins fan. I like you, and I love being in DC. I guess Commanders. And you know, I get it. But you know, look, Chicago and northern Indiana is you know close, and it does feel like that there is some movement of people based in here in Florida. We're hearing some rumbles about DeSantis. talk to me a little bit about the political landscape, the gerrymandering that might be going on. How does the midterms looking for the president? Is this normal midterms? All those kind of things seem to converge a little bit here, even before the summer's even started, Nathan.
Yeah. So let's look at the House. All 435 members of the House of Representatives are up for re-election. If you go to the prediction markets, they're around 70 to 80% that Democrats will take the House. Now, in years past, you would see a pickup of like when you had a number like that, generally you would see a pickup of like 30 to 50 seats. But the current makeup of the House, in terms of there's a lot less purple districts out there, a lot more polarization going on. So you're probably looking at a uptick of nowhere between 10 to 15 seats. And just remember, the first midterm election after a presidential election, the momentum always swings back to the other party. President Obama wins, the Tea Party comes in. President Trump wins, Nancy Pelosi becomes Speaker of the House. Same thing happens with President Biden. The Republicans did well. So the momentum always swings back in the House. But in the Senate, 1/3 of the Senate, so 33 members of the Senate are up for re-election right now. This is a very good, looking at the states, this should be a very good election for the Republicans. There's not a lot of Trump states here, there's not a lot of states here the Democrats really would have the opportunity to take unless they have a landslide election. So even though the prediction markets have the Democrats taking a Senate at 40%, think about turning Texas blue or, any types of the other stuff. It's one of those things where we just don't know because Americans generally don't vote or make the decision. And I'm talking about independents here because if you're a Democrat, you're most likely going to vote Democrat. If you're a Republican, you're most likely going to vote Republican. But those independents usually don't make up their decision until 3 to 4 weeks before the election. And anything can happen. We still haven't gotten into the primary season. We don't know who the candidate is in Texas, for example. If Senator John Cornyn wins, that obviously offers a better chance of defeating the Democratic candidate. So what I will say here is that the House is most likely, according to the odds, will flip to the Dems. The Senate, not so much. The last point I'll have on redistricting is that redistricting goes both ways. And what I mean by that is that in order to redistrict, for example, my state of Virginia right now, or, you see this in Texas and you see this in California, what's happening is they're taking districts that are, say, a Democratic +9 district or a Trump +10 district, and they're diluting it down to a +4 district or a +5 district. So they're actually decreasing the amount of support that one party has in that district in order to spread it out. And if you have a landslide election and your district went from +9 to +4, well, all of a sudden you opened yourself up to a lot of risk that things would flip and ultimately have some unintended consequences here. So I tell folks when I look at it, and this is me taking my Bloomberg hat off and just keeping my personal hat on, I think redistricting is actually just a wash.
Okay, it's a wash because you're hearing Virginia now talking about picking up 4 more Democrat seats. Gerrymandering is also in California, obviously. And the president said not too long ago that Gavin Newsom is done. He's no longer going to be running for president. You got to pick for the presidency coming up for the Democrat side?
Go back to and I'll go back to my Chicago roots because Barack Obama was my state senator when I lived in Hyde Park on the south side of Chicago. He was actually
I was working in the Illinois House when that happened. So yeah.
So I'll go back. Nobody knew that President Obama was going to be the nominee 18 months before the election. And so what I will say here is that just remember, it's only within recent years, so call it the last 10 to 15 years, that the Washingtonian politicians have been the one to drive the presidential cycles. Go back to the mid-90s. It was the governors who actually were the ones who were running for president because the governors can come back and say, look, here's what I did. Here's my state rating and so forth. The politicians from Washington, on the other hand, have a much more difficult story because they'll say, well, I passed this piece of legislation. Well, so did you and 87 other senators. Right. So I always think that, yes, I think on the Republican side, J.D. Vance is the one to beat at the moment. But again, that begs the question, what does President Trump want to do in his last 2 years of his term? But on the Democratic side, I think it's going to be a governor from one of the states just because I think and I also think that's one of the reasons why Abigail Spanberger from Virginia is leading the State of the Union Democratic response tonight is because the Democrats have to figure out 2028. Right now, they're running on a platform of we're not President Trump,
right?
Which will get you in the midterms. They'll allow you to get you in the midterms, but that doesn't get you 2028. So I think the Democrats are still trying to figure this message out. But my guess is it's going to be one of the governors.
Bashir Strandberger for the Democrat side.
Governor Whitmer from Michigan, Governor Pritzker from Illinois, Governor Newsom. It's all, all those, Governor Shapiro. I mean, I do think Senator Mark Kelly is going to have a little bit of a go at it. And I certainly think that, Representative Ocasio-Cortez will have a go at it. But, it's going to be one of those things where I think there's going to be 10 to 15 people floating presidential commission ideas or committees to study the idea. And then there'll be a robust primary process.
I love this. And we're so honored to have Bloomberg and Nathan Dean, smart guy here coming on politics, talking about it. There is one sport I think that you and I can agree on, and that happened this week, and that is the USA hockey team, men and women winning. The president just sent the plane, one of the Air Force Ones, down to Miami to pick the team up, and they're on the way to Washington.
Yep, that's one of the big. I actually overheard the journalists trying to figure out when that plane was going to land, and
it should be there in about another hour or so. I think I've been on Air Force One a few times.
And you know what? Washington is a hockey town. It always surprises me how expensive the Capitol tickets are, because the Capitals are some of the most expensive tickets in town. I mean, you can go to a Georgetown basketball game on the cheap, but if you want to go Capitals, I mean, DC is definitely a hockey town. I
mean, I can tell you the nights that Alex Ovechkin, Ovi, and Mike Green and I used to go out and hang out in DC. many nights. Look, I'll say this much. DC, it seems to have changed over the last few decades. What's the biggest change? When I hear the word this is clean the swamp out, and you're living in the swamp, and we all know that's not true. What's the feeling right now inside of DC? What's the feeling amongst the insiders, the beltways? Are they is intrepid? Are they nervous? Is it back to normal? What's going on in DC?
It's changing. I mean, this is a fundamental time in which life is changing. I mean, just pick on the lobbyists, for example. A lot of lobbyists out there who are close to retirement or have very senior experiences are Bush or Reagan era lobbyists. I mean, you have new leadership that's coming in who are Gen Z and millennials, and it's a difference of opinion. It's a different mindset. It's a difference of future. I mean, and so you have intra-party battles amongst both parties. I mean, Democrats and Republicans are having intra-party battles at the moment. And there's just this idea of we're probably within, President Trump, obviously you can criticize him or you can, support him. It doesn't really matter. But the idea here is that President Trump has changed Washington to the point where a Republican comes in, he's going to do all this stuff. A Democrat comes in, they're going to reverse almost everything and then just prop up their own. And you're going to have this seesaw moment that's probably going to take us about 10 to 15 years, 20 years to get through. And so a lot of the Washingtonians are now to the point where, is that something I want to work for? I mean, I would also point out that, little inside baseball stuff, a lot of people don't realize that a significant amount of members of the House of Representatives sleep in their offices. They live in their offices because in the past they used to have a house here, and now Monday mornings they fly in on Reagan, Thursday nights they're out to Reagan, or if you're flying to the West Coast, you're out to Dulles, and you leave town. And so as a result of that, it makes it more polarized, and you make people, they're not as building relationships as they used to. So it's a much more transactional type of town now.
That's not good. All right. This morning, Jamie Dimon said that he sees parallels to what led to the 2008 financial crisis in America. Trump says this is his economy. Many Republicans in Congress and the Senate are trying to pass bills around it. Is he a lame duck president? Is this a lame duck Congress? Is it just business as usual? Try to get to November, see who wins, and worry about it then. Did I lose you, Nathan?
So President Trump is a lame duck. He already said that he doesn't want to do another reconciliation bill, which is another bite of the one big beautiful bill. Think of that as part two. President Trump has said he doesn't need it. And by doing so, you sort of limit yourself on legislation. And if the Democrats take the House in November, as the prediction markets suggest, legislation is going to be gridlocked. And, small things like housing and crypto will get done, but nothing writ large. On the deregulation side, they're going to continue. But again, that takes time, and it's really impacting by sector. And so really the question that we have to ask ourselves is between now and the end of President Trump's end of his term, where is he going to try and use the executive authority to influence policy? And all of that, most of that is national security, international relations, trade, and tariffs. Now, we just saw the rebuke from the Supreme Court on tariffs. And so a lot of these actions are going to the courts. But there is a certain aspect of lame duckness, if I can just make that word up, that's going on with the president at the moment. What I will say is that President Trump is very effective of using the bully pulpit to change policy. And so by no stretch of the imagination am I ever going to call him a duck just yet.
Okay, I love that. All right, we are very honored to have you, Nathan, Senior Policy, Public Policy for Bloomberg. And I'll see you right back here next week, my man. I didn't have this. Once again, Nathan, we're very honored to have you from Bloomberg and Senior Policy guy at Bloomberg. And we'll see you right back here next week.
Great. Thank you. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Nathan. Bye.